What if I told you there was a third atomic bomb? One that came terrifyingly close to erasing another Japanese city from existence? This isn't speculation. This isn't alternate history. This is the true story that's been hiding in plain sight for nearly 8 decades. August 9, 1945. As the mushroom cloud climbed into the sky above Nagasaki, the world believed America had just fired its final nuclear shot. 2 bombs, 2 cities. Surely that was everything the Manhattan Project could produce, right? Wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. While radiation still poisoned the streets of Nagasaki, while survivors stumbled through the atomic wasteland searching for loved ones, scientists at Los Alamos were already assembling the core of a third weapon. And President Harry Truman? He was studying maps, deciding which city would burn next. Here's what they didn't tell you in history class. The Manhattan Project wasn't some small operation that built 2 bombs and shut down. This was an industrial monster stretching across the entire United States. Uranium enrichment plants in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, running day and night. Plutonium reactors at Hanford, Washington, churning out the deadliest substance known to humanity. Weapon laboratories at Los Alamos, New Mexico, where the world's brightest minds had learned to split the atom and were getting terrifyingly efficient at it. General Leslie Groves commanded this vast nuclear empire, and he'd established something chilling: a production schedule. The third plutonium core would be combat ready by August 19, just 10 days after Nagasaki. But it didn't stop there. Additional cores would follow every 3 to 4 days throughout August and into September. The pace was accelerating. The machinery of atomic death had learned to operate at assembly line speed. This wasn't some distant possibility. The third bomb was real, tangible. The plutonium core, forged from exotic elements birthed inside Hanford's reactors, was being machined into a perfect sphere at Los Alamos. The conventional explosives that would crush this core into a critical mass of apocalyptic fury were being tested and refined. The ballistic casing, another Fat Man design named for its bloated appearance, was being bolted together piece by piece. Everything moved forward on schedule, and military planners weren't just discussing bomb number 3. They were mapping out an extended atomic campaign that could stretch through autumn, into winter, possibly into 1946 if Japan refused to surrender. 1 bomb every few days. City after city transformed into atomic wasteland. This was the nightmare scenario hovering just beyond the edge of history. So where was Truman planning to drop this third weapon of mass destruction? To understand that, we need to enter the cold, calculating world of the Target Committee. These men, military strategists, scientists, and intelligence analysts, had met repeatedly throughout spring 1945 with one grim purpose: selecting which Japanese cities deserved atomic annihilation. Their criteria were brutally specific. Each target needed strategic importance significant enough to prove the bomb's devastating power. Each city had to be relatively untouched by previous conventional bombing, so there'd be no confusion about what the atomic weapon accomplished. Each needed military or industrial value, though this distinction would become grotesquely meaningless once the bombs fell. The original list included Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, and Nagasaki. But there was another name initially at the very top: Kyoto, the ancient capital, Japan's cultural and spiritual heart. Its historical treasures stretched back over 1,000 years. And that's precisely why it topped the list. Maximum psychological impact. One man stopped it. Secretary of War Henry Stimson personally intervened, arguing that obliterating Kyoto would create wounds too deep to ever heal. Post-war reconciliation would become impossible. America would be remembered as the nation that murdered beauty itself. Stimson won that battle, and Kyoto was spared. But that left a question: which city would take his place? After Hiroshima and Nagasaki fell, 2 cities from the original target list remained untouched: Kokura and Niigata. Military planners also identified backup targets: Yokohama, Osaka, Kobe. But evidence suggests one target was rising above all others for bomb number 3: Tokyo. Not just another city, not just another military target. Tokyo was the beating heart of the Japanese Empire. The imperial palace stood in the city center, where Emperor Hirohito, considered divine by his people, directed the war effort. Government ministries that coordinated Japan's global military operations clustered throughout the capital. Destroying Tokyo with an atomic weapon would send an unmistakable message. Nowhere was safe. No one was protected. Not even their god emperor. Here's the terrifying part. General Henry Arnold, commanding the Army Air Forces, had already received authorization to continue atomic operations without seeking presidential approval for each individual strike. The order issued July 25th was chillingly simple. Deliver additional bombs on targets as soon as they're ready. Translation? Once that Third Corps reached Tinian Island, where the 509th Composite Group waited with specially modified B-29 bombers, it could be dropped within days. No lengthy debate, no agonizing over the decision. The machinery was in motion, and stopping it would require active intervention, not passive delay. Understanding Truman's mindset during these days reveals the impossible burden crushing him. His public statements and private writings expose a man torn apart by conflicting imperatives. After learning the full extent of Hiroshima's devastation, he reportedly told his cabinet he didn't want to kill all those kids. The human cost was haunting him. Yet Truman also believed, based on intelligence estimates and the horrific casualty rates from Pacific Island battles, that invading Japan's home islands would cost hundreds of thousands of American lives, possibly millions of Japanese casualties. He was trapped between two apocalyptic choices, and the clock was ticking with brutal indifference. Every day Japan continued fighting meant continued agony. Allied prisoners of war suffered in brutal camps throughout Asia. Populations under Japanese occupation faced starvation and oppression. Combat deaths mounted across China, Burma, and countless Pacific battlegrounds. The war's machinery ground human lives into dust every single hour. Then came another complication. August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, exactly as Stalin had promised at Yalta. Soviet forces crashed into Manchuria like a tidal wave, demonstrating that the battle-hardened Red Army, fresh from crushing Nazi Germany, could annihilate Japanese forces with terrifying speed. This created a geopolitical nightmare. If Japan didn't surrender quickly, Soviet troops might occupy significant portions of Japanese territory, potentially including the northern home islands. Japan could end up divided like Germany and Korea would be. The longer the war dragged on, the more complicated the post-war landscape became. Meanwhile, inside Japan, the government was paralyzed. Even after Hiroshima, even after Nagasaki, even after the Soviet invasion shattered their Manchurian armies, the Supreme Council for the direction of the war remained deadlocked in bitter internal conflict. The peace faction, led by Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo and Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yonai, argued for accepting the Potsdam Declaration's surrender terms with one condition: preserve the imperial system. The military faction, led by War Minister Kurihiko Anami and the Chiefs of Staff, demanded multiple conditions. No occupation of Japanese soil. Japanese authorities would handle war criminals. Self-disarmament only. These hardliners were willing to sacrifice every Japanese city rather than accept unconditional surrender. The deadlock was absolute. As cities burned and atomic bombs fell, Japan's government remained frozen, unable to act. Only one person could break this paralysis: Emperor Hirohito. In an unprecedented intervention on August 10th, and again more forcefully on August 14th, after military officers attempted a coup to prevent surrender, the emperor shattered centuries of tradition. He actively directed his government to accept Allied terms. This intervention likely prevented the third atomic bomb from falling, possibly prevented dozens more. But it was an extraordinarily close call. Had the emperor hesitated, had the coup succeeded, the atomic campaign would have continued. Bomb number 3 would have fallen, then 4, then 5, City after city transformed into radioactive ruins until Japan's military faction finally accepted reality, or until there were no cities left. The third bomb's plutonium core did arrive at Tinian Island, but by then, Japan had agreed to surrender. This core, rather than incinerating a Japanese city, served a different purpose. It became the heart of the fourth nuclear weapon ever detonated, not in war, but during the test series at Bikini Atoll in 1946. The infrastructure built to produce these weapons did disappear after surrender. It became the foundation of America's Cold War nuclear arsenal. The terrible knowledge spread to other nations: Soviet Union, Britain, France, China. The precarious balance of nuclear deterrence came to define the second half of the 20th century. All of it traces back to those desperate days in August 1945. Consider what almost happened. If Tokyo had been destroyed by atomic fire, if hundreds of thousands more had perished, if Emperor Hirohito himself had died in the blast, the entire post-war order in Asia might have developed radically differently. The American occupation of Japan relied heavily on preserving the imperial system, working through the emperor to legitimize reforms and maintain social stability. Without that institution, Japan's reconstruction could have been chaos. Civil war wasn't impossible. Communist insurgency became more likely. The eventual alliance between America and Japan, which became a cornerstone of Pacific stability, might never have formed, demonstrating American willingness to destroy even Japan's most sacred symbols might have created enmity too deep to bridge. The strategic relationship that emerged, with Japan becoming America's closest Asian ally, depended on post-war reconciliation. That third bomb could have poisoned that possibility forever. Let's be clear about something uncomfortable. The strategic bombing campaign against Japan, both conventional and atomic, represents one of the most troubling chapters in American military history. The firebombing of Tokyo on March 9th and 10th, 1945, killed more people in a single night than the atomic bomb killed at Hiroshima. Over 100,000 civilians burned alive. Dozens of other Japanese cities were systematically destroyed by incendiary raids specifically designed to maximize civilian casualties and break Japanese morale. The atomic bombs were different not in their targeting of civilians. Conventional bombing had already made that routine, but in their efficiency, their shock value, their demonstration that one aircraft carrying one bomb could erase an entire city. The third bomb would have continued this pattern. The fourth, fifth, sixth bombs, all in various stages of production, would have followed. Some historians argue the atomic bombs were unnecessary. Japan was already defeated, strangled by naval blockade, armies demolished by Soviet invasion. Surrender was inevitable within weeks or months. Others maintained the bombs were essential to avoiding a catastrophically costly invasion, pointing to the military faction's continued resistance even after 2 atomic bombs and Soviet invasion proved continued defiance. The truth probably lies somewhere between these positions, complicated by the fact we cannot rerun history under different scenarios. What we know with certainty is that American leaders in August 1945 believed they needed to continue applying maximum pressure, including atomic bombing, to force surrender before the scheduled November invasion of Kyushu. The production schedule reveals how atomic warfare was becoming systematized and routine rather than special and exceptional. By late August, Los Alamos expected to deliver course supporting 2 to 3 atomic bombing missions per week by September. The 509th Composite Group had multiple aircraft and crews trained for atomic missions. Infrastructure for transporting, assembling, and delivering atomic weapons functioned efficiently. Had the war continued, atomic bombing would have become simply another tool in the American arsenal, used alongside conventional bombing and naval bombardment. The uniqueness of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as singular war-ending events wasn't inevitable. It was the consequence of Japan's surrender preventing what might have become a sustained atomic campaign. General Douglas MacArthur, designated to command the invasion of Japan, had initially been skeptical about the atomic bomb's strategic value, viewing it as a sideshow compared to the massive conventional forces being assembled for Operation Downfall. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, his view shifted. He came to appreciate how the bombs had eliminated the need for an invasion that would have consumed vast resources and lives. Yet MacArthur also understood that occupying Japan and transforming it into a peaceful democracy required preserving enough Japanese society and institutions to function. Complete destruction of Tokyo by atomic bomb might have undermined this goal by eliminating too much of the existing governmental and social structure. The scientists who built the atomic bomb held varied views about its use. Some, like Leo Szilard and James Frank, had advocated for a demonstration rather than use against cities, hoping that shocking Japan with a display would be sufficient without mass civilian casualties. Others, including Robert Oppenheimer and the majority of scientists, supported using the bomb against military-industrial targets, though many later expressed profound ambivalence about the weapons they'd created. Still others, like Edward Teller, showed little hesitation and actively promoted development of even more powerful nuclear weapons. These disagreements continued throughout the Cold War, with some Manhattan Project veterans becoming advocates for arms control while others supported expanded nuclear arsenals. The third bomb that was never dropped represents a historical turning point that almost happened but didn't. In one timeline, the timeline we don't inhabit, that bomb fell on Tokyo or another Japanese city, tens or hundreds of thousands more died. The emperor possibly perished. Ripple effects through post-war history cascaded in ways we can barely imagine. In the timeline we do inhabit, Japan's surrender came just in time to prevent this additional catastrophe. Whether this was luck, timing, or the result of the emperor's intervention remains debated. What's certain is that the apparatus existed to continue atomic bombing indefinitely. Military and political leaders were prepared to use these weapons repeatedly until Japan surrendered. Only the surrender announcement on August 15th prevented the third bomb, and the fourth and the fifth from falling on Japanese cities during the final weeks of summer in 1945. The machinery had been built, the production schedule established, the targets selected, the authorization granted. Everything was ready. The third atomic bomb came within days of being dropped. That's how close we came to a very different world. History turned on the decision of one man, Emperor Hirohito, who broke with centuries of tradition to end a war that was consuming his nation. That decision saved not just the city that would have been bomb number 3's target, but possibly saved the entire post-war order that eventually brought peace and prosperity to the Pacific. The story of the third atomic bomb is ultimately a story about how close humanity came to normalizing nuclear warfare, to accepting atomic weapons as routine tools of military strategy. We stepped back from that edge in August 1945. The question that haunts us still: will we stay back from that edge forever?